take your seats. Your Excellency, the President and the Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, Dr. William Samoei Ruto. Your Excellency, the President of the Union of Comoros and Chairperson of the AU Assembly of Heads of States, Honorable Azali Assoumani. Your Excellency, Issoufou Mahamadou, former President of the Republic of Niger. The Secretary General of AFTA, His Excellency Wamkele Mene. Honorable Chantal Najimbere, Minister of Trade, Transport and Industry in Burundi. Honorable Moses Kuria, CS for Investment, Trade and Industry in Kenya. All ministers present, all principal secretaries present, all captains of industries, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At this point, Your Excellencies, allow me to now invite Prudence Sepauhizi, the Director, Institutional Matters and Programs Coordination of ACTA Secretariat, to guide us on the program from here. Welcome, sir.
Your Excellencies, all protocol observed, as my colleague Michael has established the protocol. I would like to take us through the program of this morning. We are going to proceed with the official opening ceremony for the second ministerial retreat of the Council of Ministers on the African Continental Free Trade Area. Excellencies, as we celebrate the theme of the year of the African Union, which is acceleration of the AFCFTA implementation, at the same time, this year we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of the African Union. And it is by coincidence that we are here in Kenya, where on the 1st of June, we will also celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Kenyan independence. Your Excellencies, without further ado, we have this opening ceremony that will be graced by our presidents here present. I will first of all call on the Cabinet Secretary for Trade and Industry, Kenya, Honorable Moses Kuria, to make his opening statement. Welcome, sir.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, President William Samoei Ruto, President Assoumani, President of the Republic of Comoros, Your Excellency, and the Chair of the African Union, my brother, Honorable Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of AFCFTA, the outgoing chair of the AFCFTA summit, and the former president of Benin, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure to be here today for this very important gathering that brings together for the first time the policymakers in the form of ministers, in the form of governments, and our private sector. For so many years, as we have been going through this journey for AFCFTA, it has been a conversation of governments talking to fellow governments. But today, here in Nairobi, Kenya, and for the first time, we have on one side the private sector, and on the other hand, we have the policymakers in the form of the Africa trade ministers. When we were in Addis Ababa for the Africa Union Summit in March this year, Secretary General Wamkele Mene and myself had a discussion, and we asked ourselves, now we have come from this very rigorous phase when we have been going through the ratification and all the preliminary processes. What is the way forward? Where do we go from here? It is at that time that Honorable Wamkele requested Kenya to host the first ever retreat for the Africa trade ministers to chart the way forward and develop an implementation framework and an implementation matrix for taking AFCFTA forward. And that is how we are here today. So let me take this opportunity to thank the AFCFTA Secretary General and the African Union for really believing in Kenya, for trusting in Kenya, for believing that Kenya has got an important role to play in charting this way forward. And I want to assure you, Secretary General, that we are equal to the task. As we embark on the next 3 very interesting days in terms of the discussions that we're going to have, starting from today, with this dialogue between ministers and private sector, and for the next 2 days, that is tomorrow and Wednesday, when we break out for the Africa trade ministers to do a retreat and focus now on the implementation milestones, and for the private sector to continue talking to fellow private sector and see us answer these questions. When we discuss Africa integration, it is for whose benefit? Who are the stakeholders? The government cannot be stakeholders. Governments do not do business. Governments exist and policymakers exist to create an environment for the private sector to take advantage. And so therefore, this morning, we are asking the private sector to step forward, because it is really in your name that we do all these agreements. It is really for your own benefit that we go through all these rigorous procedures, exchanging tariff offers, looking at all the other clauses that we are looking at, so that we can be able to create an environment that is conducive for you. As we engage, there are several things that we also have to take into consideration. One, we cannot have this AFCFTA only existing in boardrooms. We want to go out there. And that is why we are saying the phase of the boardroom is over. Now it's a phase for the businesses to work together. 2 is on the need for specialization and for us to respect our diversity, to work together to exploit the good areas, the strengths that we have, and so that we can be able to leverage on the core competencies that exist in different areas. We have cotton in the West. We have got a very vibrant financial services industry here in Kenya and in the region. How can we be able to take advantage of where our respective countries are good in this area and other countries that move in? Those are the kind of discussions we are going to have. Of course, the big question still lingers in terms of the tariff offers, and I would want to see, we had a discussion last week in Doha with Secretary General Mkeremene, and we have agreed that going forward, the ministers of trade will work together with the ministers of finance in the respective countries, so that as we finish the different levels of tariff negotiations, then our finance ministers and our custom authorities can be able to take the next steps and actually publish the tariff books so that they can start to have effective meaning. Finally, as I conclude, let me also talk about the area of guided trade initiative. Kenya is part of the 8 nations that pioneered the guided trade initiative, alongside Mauritius, alongside Rwanda, Ghana, Cameroon, Tunisia, and Egypt. And now, with other countries, especially the SACU countries, now also depositing their tariff offers, we have an opportunity to expand that league of the countries that are piloting what is actually the early harvest phase of AFCFTA. So I have seen my brother Ibrahim Patel from South Africa. We are very delighted with the SACU for depositing the tariff offers, and we look forward that now, for the first time, at most of the strong economies of Africa, starting with South Africa and Nigeria and Egypt and Ghana and all other countries that would want to join the pioneering countries that have been part of the guided trade initiative, to also join us so that we can be able to share with you lessons we have learned. You remember, Your Excellency, it was in the month of October that we flagged off our first export of tea from Kenya to Ghana under the guided trade mechanism, we have learned some lessons. For example, unfortunately, this consignment arrived in Ghana in February, all the way from October. So the willingness is there, but the challenges abound. Challenges of looking at our infrastructure connectivity, challenges of looking at why we need to move from Africa, from East Africa to Europe, if you want to travel to West Africa, because of the area of the problem of the air travel between our countries. So we have got lessons that we have learned over the last few months. And I believe that as we expand the guided trade initiative, we can now be able to come up with some solutions that can be able to take us to the next level. So I want to welcome all my fellow ministers and the private sector to Kenya and wish all of us very fruitful deliberations. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Moses Kuria, the Cabinet Secretary for Investment, Trade and Industry of Kenya, for the opening remarks. I would like to inform Your Excellencies that the next speaker on the program is the chairperson of the Council of Ministers, who normally is Mr. Fernand Mafumbi, the Minister for Trade and Industry of Gabon. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it to this meeting this morning. He asked me to send his apology to Your Excellencies and also assure you that he is still committed to the AFCFTA. In his absence, Your Excellencies, there is the first Vice Chairperson of the Council of Ministers, who is the Minister of Burundi, Honorable Chantal Nijimbere, who is the Minister for Trade, Transport and Industry of Burundi. She will make her remarks on behalf of the Council of Ministers.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency, the President of the Union of Comores and Chairperson of the AU Assembly of Head of State and Government, Your Excellency, Champion of AFCFTA and former President of the Republic of Niger, dear colleague ministers, Secretary General of the AFCFTA, dear participants, all protocol observed. First of all, let me join with you all in thanking God for His grace and mercy who allow us to be here today. May His name be praised forever. Let me also appreciate the warm welcome and the hospitality conveyed to us since landing in this beautiful town of Nairobi. Your presence of you, each of one of you here, is a proof of the commitment that you want to make another milestone of the Africa we want. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the Africa we want, as outlined in the Agenda 2062, has a vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful continent. As also the theme of the year of the AU is accelerating the implementation of the Africa Trade Free Trade Area. To get there, we need to change our mindset and change challenges we face into opportunities. The African Continental Free Trade Area is one of the solutions of some socio-economic challenges that we faced. To do so, we must focus on inclusive and sustainable programs which add value of our economies and which also improving the livelihood of our population. On that line, no one can ignore the role played by the private sector, especially as the key motor for industrialization and trading. The reason why we are here today, in order to offer a platform of discussion on how to own and drive Africa Continental Free Trade Area by improving and keeping strong and active the private sector. I hope by the end of the day, we'll come up with a roadmap in order to unlock trade and investment opportunity within Africa. I believe that it's a good opportunity for all of us, ever and now, to embark the private sector in the process of implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Let's take this advantage and make intra-trade happening. I wish you a fruitful dialogue and deliberation. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chantal Nijimbere, for the remarks on behalf of the Council of Ministers. It's now my singular honor to invite the Secretary General of the AFCFTA, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, to come forward and make his remarks.
Thank you, Program Directors, Your Excellency, President Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, and our host, Your Excellency, President Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros, and Chairperson of the African Union Assembly of Heads of States and Government, Your Excellency, President Issoufou Mahamadou, former President of the Republic of Niger, champion of the AFCFTA, Honorable Cabinet Secretary Moses Korea, Honorable Minister Chantal Nijimbere, representing the Council of Ministers, Honorable Ministers, leaders of the private sector, it is a pleasure to be here with you in Nairobi for the opening session of the retreat of the Council of Ministers. I want to start by thanking President Ruto and his government for hosting us here for a very important dialogue between the private sector and the Council of Ministers for the purpose of accelerating implementation of the AFCFTA. I want to also express appreciation for President Ruto's very strong support of the AFCFTA since he came into office, and for ensuring that the AFCFTA receives the highest level attention in Kenya. President Assoumani, since he assumed the high office of Chairman of the Assembly of Heads of States and Government, made the AFCFTA his priority. I want to thank him also for his leadership. I went to see the President last month, and I said, President, we have a private sector dialogue in Nairobi in a few months, in a few weeks. Would you be able to attend? The President did not hesitate. He didn't say, when is it? He said, I will be there. And so I want to appreciate President Assoumani's leadership and the recognition of the AFCFTA as a very important flagship project of the African Union. Your Excellencies, our heads of states, I'm often asked the question, how did you make so much progress in such a short space of time? And the answer I give is very, very simple. It is the fact that our leaders are fully engaged, and the fact that 47 members of the African Union have deposited their instruments of ratification demonstrates the strongest political will that we have ever seen in our continent. And so the leadership of our heads of states is what has enabled us to reach so much progress in a very, very short space of time, confounding critics who never thought that as Africans we would be able to achieve the milestones that we have achieved. Under the leadership of President Mahamadou Issoufou, we have achieved the following progress. Over 88% convergence on rules of origin, enabling Africa for the very first time since the end of colonialism to trade on the basis of a single set of rules for products that we as Africans produce. Rules of origin is beyond just the technical jargon, technical details of trade. The fact that we've been able to converge on such a high number of products enables and positions our continent for heightened and accelerated levels of industrial development, positions our continent for investment, so that we can see the results of this integrated market of 1.4 billion people with a combined GDP of 3.4 United States dollars. That's why this retreat is so important, Your Excellencies, to enable the private sector and the ministers of trade to conclude on the remaining areas of rules of origin, the automotive sector, textiles and clothing, to also focus on accelerated implementation of the systems, the custom systems that are required for the AFCFTA to see fruition. The private sector is absolutely critical to the implementation of the AFCFTA. As Cabinet Secretary said, in Africa, the private sector is estimated to account for about 80% of total production, 67% of investment, 75% of credit that's available in the market, and of course employs 90% of people of working age. To further underscore the importance of the private sector and why this dialogue is so critical, a study by McKinsey and Company and the Brookings Institute, they estimate that the annual spending by African consumers and businesses is set to reach almost 7 trillion United States dollars by the year 2030, which is an increase from 4 trillion United States dollars from 2015. This underscores the importance of the private sector as a driver for industrial development in Africa, a driver for creating opportunities for jobs for young Africans, and of course, for innovation. The automotive sector and the textiles and clothing sector are the two remaining areas, as I mentioned, where we need to conclude in the next few days. A study by the World Economic Forum estimates opportunities available under the value chain of the automotive sector. They estimate as follows: that the automotive industry in Africa is expected to grow to more than $42 billion by the year 2027 due to increasing domestic demand, rising incomes, and high projections of growth on the basis of intra-Africa trade and the AFCFTA. In the area of agriculture, another important area, the World Economic Forum estimates that intra-Africa trade in basic agricultural products is expected to increase by 574% by the year 2030, where tariffs are eliminated in trade in agricultural products. These are some of the very encouraging projections of what we as Africans can achieve, where we aggressively implement the AFCFTA, liberalize trade amongst ourselves, and ensure that we create opportunities for young Africans. As you may be aware, last year we commenced the Guided Trade Initiative, and I'm most grateful that I had the opportunity to be here in Kenya, in Nairobi last year, when Kenya was flagging off, myself and His Excellency President Ruto, flagged off value-added agricultural produce, tea, that was exported from Kenya to West Africa. I often say that this is a remarkable story of how smallholder farmers who produce the tea are now part of the story of successful implementation of the AFCFTA, a story of inclusion of smallholder farmers who are now driving intra-Africa trade. And so I congratulate the government of Kenya for organizing smallholder farmers to be able to benefit from the AFCFTA. Similarly, we saw products that were exported from Egypt to Ghana, from Cameroon, Tunisia, and other countries. And so this year, our objective is to increase the number of countries that are part of the Guided Trade Initiative, increase the products on the basis of rules of origin of the AFCFTA. As I mentioned, Your Excellencies, the AFCFTA has corrected a long-standing anomaly, and that is that when West Africa trades with East Africa, or North Africa trades with Southern Africa, before the entry into force of the AFCFTA, we were trading on the basis of the so-called MFN rules. In other words, there was no preferential treatment of Africans trading amongst ourselves. Therefore, the AFCFTA is an opportunity for us to correct this anomaly, to accelerate and boost intra-Africa trade, to create opportunities for investment, for jobs, innovation on our continent. As I conclude, let me once again thank our leaders who are here with us today, who are here to provide us with a fresh mandate, new directives as we accelerate implementation of the AFCFTA. President Ruto and I, we were joking that we should share my salary because the president is a very, very strong supporter of the AFCFTA, and wherever he goes, he's an advocate of the AFCFTA. And so we're very, very fortunate to have our leaders with us, President Assoumani, the leader of the African Union, and of course, President Mahamadou Issoufou, ever present in the support of the AFCFTA. And so I wish all of us very, very good deliberations over the next few days. And once again, I want to thank the government and the people of Kenya for hosting us. We look forward to the discussions. We look forward to engagement with the private sector so that we jointly can undertake this very, very noble ambition, very, very noble task of integrating our continent, creating opportunities for young Africans, creating opportunities for investment, and positioning our continent for global competitiveness through industrial development in generations and decades to come. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the Secretary General of the AFCFTA, for these remarks and assuring the private sector of their role in the implementation of the AFCFTA. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for those who are following the meeting in French, make sure you tune to Channel 2. For those who are following in English, please tune to Channel 1. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, there is a man who's been spearheading the AFCFTA process right from its inception. We have here with us the champion of the AFCFTA, His Excellency Mahamadou Issoufou, who is the former president of Niger. It's now my honor to invite His Excellency for his remarks.
Excellence William Ruto, président de la République du Kenya, hôte de la retraite ministérielle,
and high delegates, Your Excellency Azali Assoumani, President of Comoros Union and the President of the African Union, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, dear ministers, Secretary General of Africa Free Trade Area, ladies and gentlemen, I am happy in this presidential briefing and of the opening of this ministerial retreat in Nairobi, here in Kenya. And I thank the spirit of democracy that has allowed dear brother Ruto, your leader that you elected, the president of this beautiful country, I seize this opportunity to renew my warm congratulations to you, sir. And I am happy of that June 1st, your country will be celebrating 60th anniversary to its accession to international sovereignty, results of the battle that the founding fathers fought, i.e. the former president Jomo Kenyatta. May their battle, determination, and Pan-Africanism service be an example to African generations now and in the future. I also do congratulate and greet my friend Azali Assoumani, President of Comoros, President in interim for the Union African, for his leadership at the head of our organization. Ladies and gentlemen, the 60th anniversary of the independence of Kenya is in line, coincides rather with the 60th anniversary of the creation of the African Union. And how else could we, if not to choose this date in the exercise of the free trade area in Africa? We can consider this as a form of an eloge to the founding fathers who had in their spirit that trade, and not only as something for prosperity and economics, but also a factor for peace. And so the free area in Africa is one of the tools that will help to realize many projects in our Agenda 2063. I have chosen this time to say this is time to put end to fratricide wars in Sudan that is coming to add into the list of the conflicts we know in Africa, in Sahel region, in Chad Basin, in Libya, in Somalia, in the Great Lake region. Trade and peace are very well connected, intertwined in fact. And so I congratulate and thank the efforts of the Minister of Health for solving every matters in line with this free area trades, in particular that of the origins of goods. Dear ministers, you are not only workers in peace, but also messengers of peace. Your contributions to the realization of the Africa we want is highly appreciated. I congratulate you and encourage you in this work. And this meeting is an occasion for you to deepen the reflections on mechanisms to undergo in order to continue with the works, in order to have the initiative of the commerce services in the second phase, and to answer to the various challenges that may arise in the implementation of free area trade in Africa. To find a convergence and to conclude on the origin rules related to automobiles and textile. And I want to remind ourselves that June 2023 is the limit, is the date that was fixed by the heads of states in order to reach that goal, to finalize and to operationalize the customs services amongst countries, and to finish with other matters that were suspended in 5 priority sectors of our services, like during the recent meeting of the free area trade meeting that was organized in CAP in South Africa. We do then have an adequate platform in Nairobi where political leaders, leaders of industries and companies, and leaders in the private sectors and investors can together share on the special role that each and everyone should play in order to have the Africa Free Areas trade from negotiation to action. This will allow the growth of intra-African trade and stimulate intra-African investment, and put in place means to overcome the challenges that Africa is facing or has been facing over the years, especially in the area of trade and economical troubles. Ladies and gentlemen, I will want to thank the visible will of the member states present, expressed through the progressive validation of national and regional strategies of the implementation of the Africa Free Area Zone. And with this, I want to congratulate the East African community, which has organized from the beginning of the month of January, a validation workshop for the implementation of Africa Free Area Zone. And this shows that we are on the right track. However, we should continue to be focused on our objectives, on our goals, because there is so much to achieve, particularly states. States are called to continue in the service and sending their dues to the secretariat for the technical aspects and the notifications to the remaining stages. We need them to congratulate the 47 member states that have ratified the protocol, and we call that every other country in the continent should participate and share in the advantages of this regime called the Free Area Zone in Africa, Africa Free Area Zone. Let me thank once more the Republic of Kenya for being one of the pioneer countries of the initiatives of this trade, of this as a platform that was launched last October. Kenya has demonstrated legal frameworks, and which is something to congratulate through various transactions, importation and exportation in the preferential regime of Africa Free Area Trade. This exercise has allowed to have informations on the states, preparations of the legal frameworks and institutional at national levels in the participating countries to help the private sector to participate in trade in the spirit of Africa Free Area Zone trade, and also for better treatment as planned by this platform. To identify the future interventions in order to grow intra-African trade and maximize the advantages of this Africa Free Area Zone trade. Ladies and gentlemen, our continent really needs more than before an inclusive economical platform, a market open as Africa Free Area Trade Zone. This will allow free circulation of services and goods, and this will contribute to a quick growth of our economies and put end to things like plagues like food insecurity. Food insecurity and malnutrition in Africa have reached their highest level possible for the last 10 years. Since the last 10 years, West Africa and Central Africa remain to be the most affected regions. And the research revealed that the combined efforts with COVID-19, climate change, has really increased the challenges in food security, and many are facing hunger in the region. According to the food security analysis of March 2023, the numbers of people who do not have regular access to good balanced diet is about 48 million during this period. June-August 2023 will be that within that period of time. It is therefore a great challenge that we can overcome through the Africa Free Area Trade Zone with concrete solutions are put in place and immediate actions to ensure change on all over the continent. This matter is a call. It is a call for the necessity to put in place a detailed plan for the development of agriculture in Africa. This will allow the exploitation of great arable land in the continent that has not yet been used. It is clear that the implementation of Africa Free Trade Area Zone will produce secondary effects like loss of revenue in the processes of in the process of freeing the tariffs, and so there is need to adjust. And this was put in place and implemented in March 2023 in Rwanda, which was the host country. And this tool is here to help the private sector to adapt to the new commercial environmental aspect in line with the memorandum of understanding of the Africa Free Trade Zone, with the $10 billion that was put in place for the next 10 years for the fund to be fully operational. Afroseed Bank has already pledged to work on this, and so the minister should work on it, on the mechanism of sensitization of resources, resource mobilization, and to evaluate the laws of wealth in various countries and what will be affected. And this is again a call to all member states to continue working for the well-being of the domestication of Africa Free Trade Area Zone protocol and its annexes. I call then all of us to put in place strategies and policies, business trade policies that will allow the private sector in various countries to benefit of the preferential regime of Africa Free Area Trade. Our continent is the new frontier of the economic development with high potentiality, the youth and the national resources. We got the means of its emergence, And the Africa Free Trade Area Zone is one of the tools that can contribute into this. It is our mission. It is your mission, especially Ministers of Commerce and Trade. I wish you a fruitful session and that you will be able to fulfill the target for the well-being of our continent. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence, Monsieur le Champion. Your Excellencies, as we gather here in this room, we have Ministers of Trade whose retreat is going to be officially opened. At the same time, we have the private sector community, whose private sector dialogue is also going to be officially opened. In that order, Your Excellency, President of Kenya, respectively, I would like to invite you to invite the chairperson of African Union to officially open the ministerial retreat of the Council of Ministers. And then thereafter, Your Excellency, you will address both the ministers and the private sector.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Take your seats, please. Thank you very much. On behalf of the people and government of Kenya, let me take this opportunity, Your Excellencies, President Azali Osmani, President of Comoros, and Chair of the Africa Union Summit, President Isufu, the champion of SCFTA, ministers present, our Secretary General of SCFTA, members of the private sector, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to welcome all of you to Kenya, to welcome all of you to the city of Nairobi, and to wish you very fruitful deliberations in this very important interaction between policymakers and our private sector in the context of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, a mechanism that will unlock the potential that exists for trade, for investment, for business in our continent, even as we work with the rest of the globe. Allow me, before I invite His Excellency, the President of Comoros and our Chair of Africa Union Summit, to take this opportunity just to volunteer some information to you. Number one, for those of us who are coming from the rest of this continent and beyond, Nairobi is a very interesting city. It is the only city with a national park within maybe 10, 15 minutes of drive from your hotel room. And being a national park, it is not a zoo. So we have wild animals there. We have leopards, we have lions, we have elephants, we have cheetahs. So just so that we are all safe, sometimes these wild animals break off the fence, and you might meet some of this wildlife next to your hotel room. Please be careful when, because they are not domesticated. Number two, let me also volunteer some information to you. scientists, and I am one of them, have proven with scientific data and information that Kenya has the earliest remains of man. This is where humanity began. The Turkana boy, which is a phenomenon that is documented by science as the earliest ever found remains of human beings on planet Earth, is right here in Kenya. And therefore it is correct for me to tell all of you, welcome home. This is where we all began. And my minister has informed me that somehow some of our officials made you to pay visas to come home. And he asked me to apologize, which I do. When one comes home, they don't pay to come home. And I want to promise you that that might be the last time you are looking for a visa to come to Kenya. Because of two reasons. Number one, because this is home, and number two, because we support wholeheartedly the ACFTA, and we must remove any impediments to the movement of people around our continent. With those remarks, let me now take this opportunity to request my good brother, the President of Comoros, and the Chair of the Africa Union Summit, President Azali, to come and make his remarks. Mr. President. No, let him come. Please, please, please. Thank you.
Permettez-moi, avant de commencer mon allocution, remercier notre cher frère
Allow me to thank my dear friend and brother
d'avoir accepté de rembourser les visas qu'on a payés ici.
who has apologized for the sake of the visa that was paid.
Et lui dire que
This is to say,
il aura à s'expliquer à mon épouse parce que moi
he
je vais
will need
perdre
to
mon
explain to my
passeport.
wife
Donc,
because
je vais
I
rester au
might
Kenya, je vais pas partir.
lose my passport. I will not go back to my country because this is home.
Monsieur le Président de la République du Kenya,
Your Excellency, sir,
mon frère
my brother,
William Ruto,
William
Excellence,
Ruto, Your Excellency,
Monsieur Mahamoud Youssouf,
Mr. Muhammad Yusuf,
cher frère,
dear
ami,
brother and friend,
ancien président de la République du Niger,
former president of the
champion
Niger
de la zone
and
de
champion
libre-échange
of
du continent.
Africa Free Trade Area,
Excellence, Monsieur
Your
Iberlan
Excellency
Mamfoubi,
Iberla Manfoubi,
président du Conseil des
President
ministres
of
de la
Ministers
ville de Cap,
Council of Africa Free Area
Son Excellence,
Trade,
Monsieur
Your Excellency Mr.
Wamkelemene,
Wamkelemene,
secrétaire général de la
General
ville de Cap,
Secretary of Africa Free Area
Excellence,
Trade, Your
Messieurs les
Excellency
des États membres
ministers
de la zone de
of
libre-échange du
member
continent
states of
africain,
Africa Free Area
Mesdames et
Trade
messieurs
Zone
les représentants
countries, dear
secteur
representatives
africain,
of Africa,
distingués invités,
Africa
assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi
private
wa
sector.
barakatuh.
Wassalamu alaikum to you all.
Je voudrais en premier
May the
lieu
Lord God bless you. First of all,
adresser à mon
I
frère
would like to
William
speak
Ruto,
to my brother William
Président
Ruto,
de la
the
République du
President of the Republic of Kenya.
mes très chaleureux
My
et
warm
sincères remerciements
and sincere
pour
gratitude
nous avoir invités
for
à cet
inviting
important
us to
rendez-vous
this important meeting
sur l'avenir de
on
l'économie
the
de
future
notre
of
continent.
African economy. My warmth and gratitude also go to the people and the government of Kenya for the warmth and fraternity kind of welcome that was given to me and my delegation since we arrived in this beautiful country, and for all the facilities that have been put in place for our services to ensure that this conference is a success. I also do want to thank the Secretariat of Africa Free Area Trade under the leadership of its Secretary General Wam Kelemene for the good organization of this dialogue with the Africa private sector and with the Ministers' Council within the Africa Free Area Trade, the representative of Africa private sector. I am happy to see your participation in this dialogue and your availability, which testifies the interest that you have for the development of our continent, for peace, security, and stability. Dear all, our continent is facing so many challenges in its growth towards a socio-economical development and harmonious one. Some years back, we experienced some of the greatest crises in terms of COVID pandemic, which has destroyed so many of our economies in the countries. Today, we face the consequences of this crisis. Then there is the Ukrainian war with all the impacts that it has. We know that its impact on peace in the world, and especially food security in our beloved continent of Africa. And now we need to all come together, ensure our autonomy in all the sectors by strengthening our capacities, our production capacities, not only to avoid lack of stocks, but also to add value to our primary resources and create employment. But these objectives can never be reached without proper coordinations of our efforts in order to reach economical freedom and develop new strategies on this in order to protect ourselves, protect our countries today and in the future. And so, I am very happy seeing the dialogue we have here with the private sector. This is a good platform to engage for the betterment of the implementation of Africa Free Area Trade. This dialogue is crucial because, as we all know, the private sector in the continent is very principal in the acceleration of Africa Free Area Trade, and I do believe that they own this dialogue and they will devote themselves in all the processes for a quick and successful implementation of a common project. Dear representatives of Africa private sector, we have always wanted and always had the desire to have a strengthening of capacities within the region and the continent through intra-trade and employment creation, through women entrepreneurship, youth and women entrepreneurship. This will help these said part of our populations to be alienated from any form of extremism. Today, with the opportunities that the Africa Free Area Trade Zone is creating, we have space for investment and business trade among countries to bring about prosperity. It is therefore time Time for our leaders and you, private sector, to share in all truth in order to overcome every obstacle that hinders us from moving in an inclusive manner towards a strong and durable economic front in the continent. You do incarnate the true life, social life, and economical life of our continent with all the production, 2/3 of its investments, 3/4 of its credits, and you are employing about 90% of its population, of its dynamic population. With this, you are then a good platform for the development of our socio-economical and ecological position of our continent. Working in synergy together, we can become a catalyst for a durable economy. It is very important for Africa Free Area trade in terms of opportunity of trade and investment. It is time to demonstrate the will to move. And for this potentiality to become fully implemented, it is very important that the Africa private sector, particularly small and medium enterprises, should own Africa Free Area Trade Zone and move with its processes. With this, I do congratulate the efforts that the Secretariat of Africa Free Area Trade has taken in partnership with the Center of International Commerce. Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, to overcome the challenge within Africa Free Area Trade Zone and to maximize their potentialities, we have developed a favorable ecosystem for the production of goods and services for our space as integrated market. Once more, we need to put in place tools that will accompany, necessary tools that will accompany the realization of this, and this will have a positive and durable impact on the continent. Things like new technology and also blue economy that constitutes a great opportunity in terms of investment and income. It is in this sense that Amoroni in the Comoros 14th to 12th to 14th of next month will be meeting on the blue area, blue market, and we do encourage African ministers of trade and industry to integrate the implementation of Africa Free Area Trade Zone in their agenda and to prepare themselves to overcome the challenges and seize the opportunities that this free area trade zone in the continent of Africa gives. It is good to integrate totally. This will offer great reward to our beloved continent. The place for the African Union, the protocol of Africa Free Area Trade, the right of intellectual property and confidentiality is part of a great move towards the realization of this dream. And in our engagement, government should work hand in hand with the private sector, with the civil society and our citizens in order for the Africa Free Area Zone not fail by only being an illusion. The partnership, public-private partnership, is very important for our durable growth in funding all the technical assistance. This will allow African countries and industries to develop and grow and help us reach our goal of Africa, developed Africa for Africans. And with this, I would like to say there is need to institutionalize a dialogue with Africa private sector in the implementation of Africa Free Area Trade. It will be a good model in the area. My country, Comoros, has began the process of dialogue, public-private dialogue, putting in place a platform of regular exchanges. These exchanges today is very beneficial to my country. Ladies and gentlemen, actors of private sector, for Africa Free Area Trade to be operational, all our countries should move in the ratification of its treaty. It is the advocacy we are doing now, and we are convinced that the remaining countries will join us in this good move, that together we shall make this ambition a success and business opportunity for our beloved continent and companies and people in particular, and the youth and African women. Before finishing, I want to congratulate my dear brother Mamadi Sufu, present here. This opportunity, this great opportunity to have him as champion of this major ambition that we have. I know him very well. He has always invested himself for the interest of Africa, and I do thank him and ask you all to clap for him and encourage him so that we shall all reach this great work. Once more, my brother Ruto, thank you for this warm welcome. Thank you all. Applaudissons pour le président Ousmane. S'il vous plaît, regagnez vos places.
Let me just take a few moments to recognize all of us leaders who are present here, and to again welcome you to Nairobi and Kenya, to this historic meeting, because I am a great believer that we are at a historic juncture in world development in which Africa is emerging as a focal point of important global discourse. This is therefore a crucial opportunity for us in Africa to define the terms and conditions under which we shall pursue African self-sufficiency in order to actualize the African right to self-determination. I see this as an underlying expectation as well as the fundamental philosophy of the Africa we want. The cardinal aspirations underpinning the Africa Union's Agenda 2063 are the output of sustained deliberation. They also require us to engage in deeper analysis through inclusive deliberation in order to clarify the path by which Africa will arrive at its place as the global economic powerhouse of the very near future. It often appears as though matters canvassed at the AU level are purely and exclusively intergovernmental. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. The economy, development, and self-sufficiency are multisectoral and interconnected concerns that must be pursued through collaboration and consultation by all stakeholders in the public as well as the private sectors at the domestic, regional, as well as continental levels. It is through robust dialogue, guided by this understanding, that we have made progress in developing and implementing a blueprint for the realization of Africa's aspirations. Recognizing that the contribution of the private sector is vital to Africa's socio-economic transformation, and that its voice must define the dialogue about integration and economic reliance, is a major component of our mission, not just in this meeting, but on a mission as a people and as a continent. This event, which is designed to underscore and promote the private sector's involvement in the achievement of Agenda 2063, is therefore of particular importance. Everyone who has participated in organizing this event and everyone who is taking part in these proceedings is making a significant contribution in moving the agenda forward by enhancing the role of an indispensable dimension of development, the private sector. This is why I'm delighted and grateful that you have all honored our invitation to the African Private Sector Dialogue. I welcome you all to Kenya's capital city of Nairobi, and on behalf of the people of Kenya, extend a very warm welcome to you all. Coming at a time when the Africa Union heads of state and governments have set the pace for the effective implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, this dialogue provides a crucial forum for collective reflection on matters of vital significance. I am glad for this opportunity that we shall have at this dialogue to share experiences on past endeavors, to understand regional integration, assess the current status of ongoing processes, and use the best of our collective knowledge to forge the way into the future of African prosperity. The increasingly complicated, delicate, and uncertain geopolitical environment has exerted disruptive pressures upon global trading systems. Emanating from such diverse events as Brexit in 2016, whose effects continue to reverberate throughout world economies, the World Trade Organization's Doha negotiations that remain unconcluded, escalating protectionism, and more recently, the COVID pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and of course, the climate crisis that we all face. The shocks and stresses arising from these events have exacerbated the vulnerability of African economies and intensified poverty and suffering. The Russia-Ukraine conflict alone has disorganized food and energy supply chains which serve our continent, causing acute shortage and driving commodity prices to unprecedented levels that are unaffordable to the majority of our people. This complicated crisis must alert us to the unacceptable reality that as matters presently stand, our economies and societies are prone to the negative impacts of events taking place in lands very far away from us. This reality arises due to two primary facts that go into the heart of the Agenda 2063 aspirations generally and the ACFTA in particular. First, Africa urgently needs to work its way steadily and rapidly up from the bottom of the global value chains by unlocking the full potential of our abundant endowments of minerals, energy, natural resources, and human capital through industrialization, mining processes, and manufacturing. 60% of global arable land reserves are in Africa, and we have not begun to fully utilize. African exports are among the world's least diversified, with commodities accounting for over 60% of the total merchandise export in 45 of the 55 countries. This situation exposes us quite badly to global commodity price shocks, effectively undermining the continent's prospects for inclusive growth and development. Secondly, intra-Africa trade is remarkably low, at 17% compared to 40% in Asia, 60% in the Americas, and 70% in Europe. The bulk of Africa's imports and exports relate to markets outside the continent. Although Africa has been a net importer of agricultural commodities since the year 2000, 81% of these imports come from outside Africa, while 78% of its exports are destined for the rest of the world, not Africa. We must be intentional and deliberate about rehabilitating our economy as a continent from these grave deficiencies in order to correct the obvious vulnerability that they cause. A little disruption in the supply chain causes major shocks of imports of commodities and export of the same. We have a highly promising opportunity to sustain a robust conversation about resilience, generate strong consensus regarding self-sufficiency, and design policies and strategies that will direct public and private investments towards competitive efficiencies, increasing employment, creating wealth, and making sure that we are less vulnerable as a continent. A major enabler of continental economic takeoff, requiring considerable investment, is infrastructure. Low infrastructure connectivity is a serious impediment of our ambition to realize Africa's full trade and economic growth potential. Consequently, this dialogue provides the perfect occasion to align government and private sector complementarity with the colossal demand for port, rail, road, and air transport, power and energy, as well as information, communication, and technology infrastructure. Here is the opportunity in more detail. With appropriate levels of connectivity, Africa's digital economy is projected at US $180 billion by 2025, or 5.2% of the continent's GDP. That's just technology. And US $720 billion by 2050, or 8.5% of African GDP. And here is the infrastructure demand in context. Lack of efficient transport networks increases the price of goods traded among African countries by between 30 and 40%, rendering Africa effectively uncompetitive and eliminating the opportunity for us to trade merely because of logistics. You've heard from my Minister for Trade that tea, which was supposed to take 3 weeks or less to get to Ghana, took 3 months. Because it didn't go to Ghana. It went the opposite direction first because of transport logistics. Bearing in mind that 16 African countries are landlocked, underdeveloped transport connectivity hampers intra-Africa trade and drives up the cost of imports and exports with regard to other parts of the world. To further illustrate this point, I remind you of the confinement, which I just said, of value-added Kenyan tea destined for Ghana, which left, and I was there with Wamkele, which left Nairobi on the 5th of October, but it got to the port of Tema in February the next year. The current level of lack of connectivity is a great impediment to our progress as a continent. And therefore, the Agenda 2063, which speaks with clarity on what type of infrastructure that we need to be able to connect our countries, eliminate the barriers that are erected by our boundaries, and human capital and human beings who hamper trade. These are unnecessary impediments to trade and investment in our region. The current level of technology in the fields of infrastructure development across sectors is fairly high. This dialogue is a golden opportunity for African private sector and African governments to deploy the concept of technology leapfrogging, thereby ensuring that advanced technologies are incorporated into priority infrastructure investments. Similarly, the implementation of the single African air transport market must be attended to in this dialogue with particular urgency. Already there is a conversation between Kenya, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Uganda, on how we can consolidate our air transport and have a regional airline that can move people, that can move goods, that can move services across our region without the current unnecessary impediments caused by air transport fragmentation. Similarly, the implementation of this will define the opportunities for private sector to invest in a liberalized air transport sector and enhance our air traffic penetration from the current 14.5%. African integration will also benefit significantly from this endeavor. The overarching methodology of the Africa we want is to transcend all the shortcomings, gaps, and vulnerabilities currently impeding Africa's progress and potential by redefining them as transformational opportunities for private-public collaboration. Public-private partnerships have the potential to augment the program for infrastructure development, as well as the African Development Bank's initiative to facilitate projects aimed at bridging the continent's infrastructure gap to sustainably support connectivity. I will give you an example. We're now diversifying on how to transport energy. We do not have to invest as government on transmission lines. We believe the private sector can invest in transmission lines so that we can pay a willing charge as government, leverage on the expertise of the private sector, on the resources of the private sector, enhance private sector capacity to be able to work with us as governments on the delivery of public programs, whether it is supply of energy, whether it is transmission of energy, or in the case of Kenya, we are now having a whole program on how to deliver water on a water purchase agreement instrument that allows the private sector to work with us in ensuring that we can deliver water, drinking, for irrigation, for use by livestock, to our people. And therefore, there is opportunity for the private sector to work with the public in areas that were considered strictly public goods space. I trust that I have adequately made out the case for the high level of expectations I have in connection with this dialogue. I anticipate your recommendations and policy proposals on the best methods of developing Africa's transcontinental and interregional infrastructure. I also expect that this dialogue will propose optimal private-public partnership frameworks to accelerate our infrastructure development agenda. This moment requires us to be bold and ambitious in fashioning our way up from the bottom of the global trade, productivity, and industrialization. I encourage you to extend your deliberations into such possibilities as African shipping lines, dedicated cargo airlines, and a network of trans-Africa railway lines laid down by each country across its territory that connect seamlessly across our borders. We are currently having a conversation between Kenya, Uganda, DRC, including Congo Brazzaville, to see how we can connect the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic. I think there is only a section of 1,000 kilometers of rail, and that should be connected. And as countries, we are prepared to work on it together, that we can do our section in Kenya. Uganda are already working on their section. We are discussing with the government of DRC to see how together we can get the resources to get the 1,000 kilometers in DRC connected into the Congo River and transport our goods and products across the heartland of Africa. A vital area that I will expect this dialogue to effectively address is the matter of sustainable financing. The opportunity is ripe for governments to collaborate with the private sector and establish a strong institution capable of de-risking African infrastructure development financing. The partnership between Afreximbank and ACFTA Secretariat for purposes of establishing an adjustment fund is timely, highly appropriate, and commendable. Such a fund would cushion countries against short-term revenue losses and support eligible private sector firms to upscale operational capacity in order to undertake projects and other opportunities on a continental scale. It is also imperative that we proactively seek a resolution to the disparities in currencies and the consequential impediments it poses to intra-African trade. Trade, ladies and gentlemen, cannot take place without efficient and a unified payment system. Although there has been introduction of several regional payment infrastructure in the continent, we lack a single system that seamlessly facilitates trade among all our nations, eliminating the obstacles posed by varying currencies. I am, however, delighted to note that Afreximbank, in its mandate to facilitate intra-Africa and extra-Africa trade, embarked on building a centralized payment and settlement system to support trade under the ACFTA. It is called the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System. Banks and payment providers can plug directly to it to enable secure and instant payment in local currency. The system is designed to reduce or eliminate the challenges of cross-border payments and by so doing, accelerate intra-Africa trade. Let me say this. I think it is important for the trade ministers who are here. We are all struggling, and all our businessmen are struggling, and our traders are struggling to make payments for goods and services from one country to another because of differences in currencies. And in the middle of all this, we are all subjected to a dollar environment. Kenyans want to pay for Tanzanian goods in dollars. Tanzania wants to pay for DRC goods in dollars. Egypt wants to pay. Why are we bringing dollars in the middle of our trade? This is the question we should be asking ourselves. And in the process, all our business people are stranded. Egypt cannot pay for our tea because they are looking for dollars. We cannot pay for their sugar because we are also looking for dollars. You know? And this is I had a conversation with President Orama of the Afreximbank, and they have built a mechanism where all our traders can trade in the local currency, and we leave it to the Afreximbank to settle all the payments in local currency. We do not have to look for dollars. Our businessmen, our business people, our traders will concentrate on moving goods and services and leave the arduous task of currencies to Afreximbank. I know we are all trying to see because of what the dollar has done to all our economies. The dollar has moved from less than 1% in the US to about 5.2%. With that movement, and I am told it is the steepest rise in interest rates ever since the US established their mechanism. That steep rise has caused us unnecessary trouble. I think it is important for us to figure out. Many of us are saying, oh, maybe we should move away from the dollar to the yuan. Maybe we should move away from the dollar to another currency. I suggest that we have a mechanism where we can settle all our payments, whether between our countries or externally, using our local currencies, and we have a mechanism like the one that has been put up by the AfriExim to settle all that so that we don't have to be hostage to any one currency or the other. Without a single payment platform, payment instructions from one African country to another typically passes through several intermediary financial institutions, leading to increased costs, complications, problems, and unnecessary currency fluctuations, and ends up being a whole ecosystem of confusion. Additionally, the time has come to introduce Pan-African insurance agencies and other African institutions to opportunities in the SCFTA market. My brother Mekele, you have a job to do. But first of all, we must take decisive steps to strengthen our financial institutions to effectively support a strong private sector performance in the SCFTA and general Pan-African business. There is an ample body of best practice from successful regional integration experiences, like the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the Southern Common Markets, which establishes that the full benefits of regional trade agreements can only be maximized when member states prioritize trade facilitation, especially the ease of cross-border activity. Non-tariff barriers distort investment dynamics and impede competitiveness. As a result, non-tariff barriers effectively undermine or even invalidate a free trade area. This is why we must take such barriers as weak transport and logistics capacity, customs-related delays, rules of origin, import bans and export restrictions, quotas and levies, technical barriers, import permits and licenses very seriously, because they ultimately reverse all the steps we try to make towards a free trade area. They may look small, they may look incremental, but they are sum total amounts to a reversal of what we are all trying to achieve. I was giving an example to the private sector this morning of, Uganda is our second best trading partner with Kenya. But you find some bureaucrats. President Museveni had to call me about 2 days ago to ask me about Uganda milk that had challenges coming into Kenya. Yet we have all manner of products we are exporting to Uganda. These kind of non-tariff barriers ultimately amount to undermining our free trade area. And we must be vigilant to make sure that such small steps do not amount to whole barriers. As I said, for SCFTA to be effective, this dialogue must make it clear that a free trade area is precisely that, free trade area, period. It should not mean anything else. Other critical outputs expected from this dialogue span such a broad range of areas as labor mobility, protection of domestic investors, governance of state-owned enterprises, competition policy, and climate action. I take this opportunity to appreciate the good work of the ministers and their technical teams in concluding all SCFTA instruments necessary for commencement of preferential trade, notably the agreement establishing the SCFTA as well as the protocols on trade in goods, trade in services, resolution of disputes, investments, competition policy, and intellectual property rights, as well as all other protocols that support the implementation of the free trade area. Further, I am encouraged to note the progress in ongoing discussions to develop the equally essential protocols of e-commerce, women and youth in trade, and other programs that will be explained to you in the course of your retreat. By these instruments, we underscore our commitment as Africa to inclusive trade that recognizes and empowers vulnerable and traditionally marginalized segments of the population who often bear the brunt of poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment, and signal as a continent our agenda to leverage ICT and the internet to accelerate trade and integration. Even as we appreciate the achievements in concluding these protocols, I recognize the outstanding issues, particularly as pertains the protocols on trade in goods and trade in services that must be resolved for the efficient implementation of SCFTA. I am very confident that the men and women who are in this meeting, the 29 ministers present, and all the other delegations will be able to resolve these issues for the bigger picture for us to move into the future. These outstanding issues are the reason why the ministerial retreat has been convened. I encourage ministers to utilize this opportunity to make progress towards concluding these issues in a manner that is both consistent with the objectives of SCFTA, facilitates its efficient implementation, and is beneficial to our continent. Please, good people, do not let us down. We are banking on you because this progress is urgent, is necessary, and is important. As I do so, I take this opportunity to congratulate the countries which have taken the tremendous step of signing and ratifying the SCFTA, and to encourage those in the process of doing so to undertake this noble and historic mandate as soon as possible in order to pave way for the next global economic powerhouse, a seamless African market. This is also a chance to recognize that the guided trading initiative formulated to accelerate the implementation of the SCFTA did launch, and that Kenya was among the earliest exporters under the initiative. Since then, a number of countries have joined the initiative and commenced their exports. I encourage those countries that have not yet joined the initiative to do so and explore the wonderful free trade possibilities that they will be able to promptly access. Further, I challenge our ministers as they deliberate on the most appropriate resolutions to the outstanding issues in connection with the protocols to envision a unified Africa and promote the creation of coherent regional value chains whose outputs will bear the proud Made in Africa distinction. This is how we will make it possible to market the continent abroad as a single investment area. Our ministers should also dedicate their full capacities to the continental imperative to shift away from primary production into value addition and advanced production in the context of a broader industrial base and product diversification. Similarly, you have been assigned the task of generating viable strategies to resolve Africa's connectivity deficit in order to overcome logistical barriers to trade. In respect of this assignment, and our chairman is here of AU, and I have the brief from my colleagues, heads of state, I encourage you to be ambitious and to demonstrate urgency. I hope our ministers are listening to me. I have been sent by your bosses. Please, don't let us down. Africa should be a hub for manufacturing. For example, active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are the main inputs for drugs and medicines, are plenty in our continent. Africa can be the source for all APIs. This ambition can and should be realized to cut down the cost of medicines and address our quality of healthcare. Many similar opportunities exist, and we must plan for these investments so that they can happen. Finally, it is very important that our ministers embrace the task of expediting the ratification of the protocols on the movement of people in order to support trade in services and free movement of business, especially business people, which is a critical factor of free trade. And I want to urge all of us, in the presence of our chairman, that as we go forward, we have demonstrated sufficient political will as policymakers. We want our private sector to equally pull their weight so that we can move together. We will be making additional interventions. We will be making additional steps. We are considering, as AU, as heads of state, a mechanism where we can improve on the mechanism of the Africa Union, so that Africa Union can speak on certain matters for all of us as a continent. We can negotiate better if, as a continent, we can negotiate together. We should be able to negotiate together on matters trade. This is one area that countries must surrender some of its issues to the Africa Union the way the EU have done. We can do better than the EU. We can do better than other trading blocs. We have made the conscious decision that we want this continent to be the single trading market with a population by 2050 of 2.5 billion people and a GDP of $3.5 trillion. That commitment will unlock the tremendous potential that we have in this continent. And I am a great believer that the policymakers, the heads of state, will be able to provide the mechanism for us to be able to realize that great potential that exists in our continent. And secondly, we must also act together on matters of peace and security. It is not possible that this continent shall continue to be a place of conflict and war. What is going on in Sudan is unacceptable. What is going on in DRC is unacceptable. We must be able to work together so that we do not destroy our infrastructure, we do not destroy our resources, and we harness the full potential of the African young people for them to make progress, not make war. With these remarks, I now wish you all fruitful discourse and productive deliberations I will be most delighted to receive reports of a successful African private sector dialogue and ministerial retreat. I must hasten to encourage all our visitors to find time and experience the singular delight of amazing people, wonderful natural attractions, and scenic beauty, as well as the incomparable flora and fauna that makes up magical Kenya. The African Private Sector Dialogue and Ministers' Retreat is now duly launched. Thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless Africa. Asante sana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for very wonderful remarks. A round of applause again to His Excellency the President. Your Excellency, you have made it clear that AfCFTA is going to make Africa the next global powerhouse. And you said AfCFTA will make Africa the manufacturing hub for the globe. This is a dialogue. Your Excellency, you've just launched a dialogue with the private sector. Your Excellency have also said that the AfCFTA implementation will only be meaningful if the private sector takes over, champion it. And you have exercised your political will. Will you allow us, Your Excellency, 5 minutes to listen to the private sector voice so that it is a full dialogue? I received a yes. I will now invite the CEO of African Association of Manufacturers, Automotive Manufacturers, to come forward and make intervention of no less than 5 minutes to highlight the importance of the private sector in the implementation of the AfCFTA. Dave Coffey, please welcome.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, Honourable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to engage you specifically on the automotive industry in Africa. The continent is at a cusp right now in the sector. You have 5 countries in Africa that are either these are hub countries, assemblers that are either implementing policy or approving to implement policy this year. And they include Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Egypt. We are a private sector Pan-African automotive association whose members are global component manufacturers, global vehicle manufacturers, service providers, and financial institutions that add value to the automotive sector. We work with African governments to refine, to develop, to implement policies and ecosystems that will attract the private sector investment and unlock the economic potential of the continent. Africa can become the manufacturer of between 4 and 5 million vehicles a year, with the benefits of significant employment and contribution to GDP, and obviously a big impact on balance of payments. This would be 20 CKD plants completely knocked down on the continent, which will have a very significant impact. So our mission is to industrialize and grow the sector in Africa. The industry is a global production and trade system, with OEMs deciding where they're going to manufacture what. And you're not going to have the same vehicle manufactured in the same location in Africa. It will be a production and trade system where OEMs make specific models in specific locations and trading across the continent and importing into those countries too. The component manufacturers will follow the OEMs. That's how it works. The OEMs drive the scale, the technology, and the OEMs go in and invest themselves. The effective implementation of the Continental Automotive Strategy will cause the OEMs to decide what they do where. It's very encouraging that we have had a Continental strategy approved as a living document that's going to get implemented by a task force that also comprises of member states. This is a significant step and is the right way to go about it. Not every country will assemble a vehicle. Some countries will participate in the value chain, and that's what's absolutely critical for inclusivity across the continent. The architecture of these policies is very important, that it promotes production and trade across Africa. But I wanted just to touch on the rules of origin, because well-structured and ambitious rules of origin are very, very important to industrialization. And particularly, I want to touch on component manufacturing, because I know there are concerns from emerging economies that the rule can't be too high. We promote a 40% for a number of reasons, and I'm going to share with you the reasons why it is inclusive. But they are critical, well-structured, and ambitious rules of origin are critical to support industrialization in any free trade area. Global component makers and countries won't allow their industry to be placed at risk after taking decades to actually create that industry. So it's important to find a balance. Too low levels of originating material will allow people to manipulate the system with transfer pricing, poor customs controls, etc. We can't afford that. We have one opportunity to actually industrialize Africa in the automotive sector. We know that there's a great and growing interest in our minerals in Africa. It's critical, and countries are taking that lead to actually transform minerals. From an automotive perspective, it doesn't mean you have to make a battery. You can add value in the value chain, and actually that contributes significantly to the industry. It's every country doesn't have to make a full component. It can make part thereof and actually pass it on to a neighbor for value addition, and that's important. So if I could just touch on, so why is it inclusive? Why is even 40% inclusive for component manufacturing? Accumulation provisions that are well designed allow subcomponents and materials to be traded across Africa, and for the originating material to accumulate into the final product. Emerging component manufacturers, our advice is find a partner. Get yourself a technology partner in Africa that's currently manufacturing, because they bring multiple advantages. The skills, the technology, and the sourcing of the value chain. They're doing it already. Tap into that and actually allow that to feed. The collaboration on the continent in automotive is absolutely critical to getting this right. The industry allows a developmental path. By partnering a component manufacturer in a developed economy, that manufacturer wants to expand. The emerging economy wants to grow with technology and support the OEMs in the volume growth. So, case studies of industrial partnerships across the world have shown that carefully developed accumulation provisions allow for very good industrialization. There are existing regional economic communities and customs unions today that have agreements. Let's implement them effectively. Let's use them. There are countries in customs unions with industries. The opportunity is to actually develop that, quickly implement, and actually develop capability along that. The Automotive Task Force is a big opportunity for the development, because best practices will be shared with member states through that. The opportunity to localize on the continent on the significant scale that the AFCFTA offers will actually allow localization of components that weren't localized before. That's important. So Afrexim Bank, rounding off, have actually just awarded a contract to develop a value chain study for the whole of Africa and find the footprint of who manufactures what through the value chain. So I request, from the private sector perspective, let's be bold, as the President said. Let's be deliberate. This is not going to happen by chance, right? Let's have ambitious rules of origin. Let's think beyond our own country. Let's think Africa and collaborate, actually, to bring about a well-integrated automotive industry in the future. This is the chance we've got within the AFCFTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of that particular session. So to wind up, would like to all be upstanding, as we are now going to finish that particular session with the national anthem, after which we shall allow His Excellency to retreat before we get to the other engagement with the private sector. So at this point, I'll request that if there's anyone who's seated, to kindly be upstanding as we now have the national anthem. Kindly let's remain standing as we now allow His Excellencies to retreat. Then the next session, you'll be guided on how that will begin, where we'll have the private sector coming in for panel discussion. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests.